I watched President Ramaphosa's speech at the United Nations, and I've never been more disgusted with a South African leader in my entire life. This man stood on that international stage representing millions of South Africans and spent his time obsessing and suckling over the bosom of Israel and Palestine while my country burns around us all. Let me be crystal clear about something. I am a South African taxpayer. You are a South African taxpayer. Our tax rand funds his international trips, his maximum security, and his presidential lifestyle. And what do we get in return? A president who cares more about conflicts 6,000 kilometers away from the war zone that South Africa has become under his watch. Ramaphosa stood at that UN podium talking about taking Israel to the International Court of Justice over alleged war crimes. The sheer audacity of this man is breathtaking. He wants to drag another country to international court while South African women cannot walk into the corner shop without fearing for their lives. You want to talk about crimes, Mr. President? Why don't you and I talk about the war crimes happening in your own backyard? Let's talk about the fact that South African women are being murdered, raped, our kids are being tortured at rates that would make conflict zones look very peaceful. Let's talk about our children being kidnapped, trafficked, and abused while you play international human rights activist. Where is the ICJ case for South African women? Where is the international intervention for South African children? Where's your righteous anger for the men that are overthrown in this country and for the people who voted for you? You have sisters, you have daughters, you have female friends and colleagues, and every single one of them lives in fear. Not fear of some distant conflict, but fear of walking outside their own homes, fear of going to the shops alone, fear of coming home late from work, fear of existing as women in the land of South Africa. This is not normal. This should not be acceptable. But it has become our reality under Ramaphosa's leadership, because while he is worried about Palestinian children thousands of kilometers away, South African children in the land he's supposed to be governing are disappearing in their own neighborhoods. A sister calls her brother when she gets home safely, because we have all accepted as a people that being a woman in South Africa is inherently dangerous. We've normalized living in a country where half the population cannot move freely without fear. And our president, he is more concerned with Middle Eastern politics than the safety of his own citizens. That is absolutely disgusting. Ramaphosa wants to talk about the war crimes in Gaza. Let me tell you about the war crimes in South Africa. We have murder rates that exceed most actual war zones. We have rape statistics that would embarrass conflict regions. We have kidnapping rates that make international headlines for all the wrong reasons. But there is no war in South Africa, right? No, it's just a completely collapsed criminal justice system, police who cannot protect citizens, courts that release criminals faster than they can be caught, and a president who thinks the real problem is happening in the Middle East and not in his own backyard. My neighborhood itself, my childhood neighborhood, has become a military war zone. Electric fences, burglar bars, alarm systems, and armed response teams. We live like we are under siege because we are under siege. But Ramaphosa is worried about seizures in other countries, it seems. And here is the really sickening part. We've become so used to corruption that it doesn't even shock us anymore. Ramaphosa stands on international stages preaching about justice and human rights while running a government so corrupt that stealing has become a career path for them. Ministers awarding contracts to their families, that's another Tuesday for you. Municipal officials looting service delivery budgets, that's another Wednesday in the neighborhood. Provincial leaders living in luxury while their provinces collapse around them, just another Thursday. It's just another week in the so-called Rainbow Nation. We pay taxes that disappear into private bank accounts. We fund infrastructure projects that only exist on paper. We finance hospitals that don't have enough medicine and schools that don't have teachers. But sure, let's worry about international justice while our own government makes a mockery of the concept daily. What exactly is Ramaphosa's obsession with the Middle East? What is your obsession with the Middle East along with all these other African corrupt leaders? Why are you spending so much time, energy, and political capital on conflicts that have nothing to do with your South African citizens that are also suffering? Israel and Palestine have been in conflict longer than South Africa has been a democracy. There are dozens of international organizations, regional powers, and global leaders working on that issue. Pardon my Greece. I don't know why I'm stuttering today. They don't need South Africa's intervention. They especially don't need intervention from a president who cannot even intervene in his own country's crises. But South African women being murdered daily, that doesn't apparently require presidential attention. South African children being trafficked before your very eyes, well, that's not really worth international campaigning. South African families living in fear, well, it's not really dramatic enough for the UN stage. You get what I mean? Do you know how much money Ramaphosa Pinocchio has spent on his Middle East activism? Do you know how many government officials have been deployed to work on Palestine-Israel issues? Do you know how many diplomatic resources have been diverted from actual South African interests to pursue this international virtue signaling project? That money could have gone to police training. Those officials could have been working on crime prevention. Those diplomatic resources could have been focused on attracting investment to create jobs for South Africans. Instead, we get a president who treats the UN like his personal platform to show the world how morally superior he is while his own people suffer under his failed leadership. While Ramaphosa worries about humanitarian crises in other countries, South African hospitals are killing people through negligence, underfunding, and corruption. Patients die in corridors waiting for treatment. Women die in childbirth because of collapsed maternal health care. Children die from preventable diseases because basic medicines simply are not available. But sure, let's take Israel to court. Let's spend millions on international legal fees while South African mothers continue to bury their children because the president cares more about Palestinian mothers than South African ones. Our healthcare system has become a death trap for anyone who cannot afford private medical care. But Ramaphosa is more concerned with alleged humanitarian violations in Gaza than the actual humanitarian crisis in government hospitals across South Africa. South African children are growing up functionally illiterate and innumerate because our education system has collapsed under ANC mismanagement. Schools without textbooks, teachers who can't teach, infrastructure that's falling apart, and educational standards that have been lowered so far they are meaningless. But sure, let's focus on Palestinians' rights to education, while South African children's futures are destroyed by our own government's incompetence. The irony is sickening. Ramaphosa preaches about children's rights on international stages, while South African children are failed by every single government system that is supposed to serve them. Our roads have become obstacle courses. Our bridges are engineering nightmares waiting to collapse. Our water systems are contaminated or non-existent, and our power grid has turned electricity into a luxury item. But instead of fixing any of this, Ramaphosa wants to fix the Middle East. Instead of fixing South African infrastructure, he's too worried about Palestinian infrastructure. Instead of dealing with our service delivery crisis, he is campaigning for international justice first before his own people. Every pothole I hit reminds me that my president cares more about roads in Gaza than roads in Gauteng. Every power outage reminds me that he is more concerned with Palestinian electricity than South African electricity. I live in a country where crime has become the defining feature of daily life, where security has become the biggest household expense for anyone who can afford it, where fear has become the default emotion for stepping outside your home. Children can't play in the parks anymore because they are not safe. Women cannot jog in the morning anymore because they are not safe. Families can't drive at night because they are not safe. Businesses close early now because they are not safe. This is not normal. This is not acceptable. This is the result of a government that has completely failed in the most basic responsibility, that is protecting its citizens. But Ramaphosa is more worried about protecting Palestinians than protecting South Africans. He is more concerned with Gaza's safety than Gauteng's safety. Unemployment has reached levels that would trigger revolutions in other countries. Look at what happened in Kenya. Young South Africans have given up looking for work because there is no work. Families are choosing between food and electricity because they have both become luxury items. Our currency is a joke. Our credit rating is trash. Our economic growth is non-existent. Investment is fleeing the country faster than ANC officials flee corruption charges. But let's spend the money on international legal battles that have nothing to do with South African economic interests. Let's alienate trading partners and investors for the sake of Middle Eastern politics that won't put a single rand in South African pockets. Here's what makes me even angrier. Ramaphosa campaigned as the president who would clean up corruption, restore service delivery, and make South Africa work for all its citizens, and you believed him. You voted for his party because you hoped things would get better. Instead, you got a government that is more interested in international acclaim than domestic governance. You got a leader who treats South African problems as less important than foreign conflicts. We got someone who uses our tax money to fund his global activism while we suffer under his local failures. Mr. Ramaphosa, let me be very clear from this summer sambit to you. South Africans don't give a flying ham sandwich about your UN speeches. We don't care about your international legal battles. We don't care about your Middle Eastern activism. What we do care about is being able to walk outside safely. We care about having electricity. We care about clean water. We care about functioning hospitals. We care about schools that actually educate our children. We care about the police who actually fight crime. Fix South Africa first, and then if you have any time left over, then you can worry about fixing the rest of the world. But until my sisters and your sisters can walk free, until children can stop disappearing, until our hospitals stop killing people through negligence, and until our government stops stealing everything that isn't nailed down, your international human rights activism is nothing but disgusting, hypocritical horseradish. You want to fight injustice? Start in your own backyard. You want to protect human rights? Protect South African human rights first, because you're the president of the Republic of South Africa. You want to make a difference? Then make a difference for the people who pay your salary. Until then, keep our country's name off your international virtue signaling campaigning mouth. We are embarrassed enough already.